View from the Gutters, episode 141. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss the question, 5 Books of Blood, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 134.59. Are you...
I just
y'all
know everything's
ready?
Chrome in the future.
I am very ready.
You ready? You guys
I'm ready
ready?
to rock.
Ready? View from the Gutters, episode 141. I'm Andrew Chard.
I'm Tobiah Panchin.
I'm Kaylee Fleeman.
I'm Kid DeForge.
Brant Gillahan Eddie.
And I'm Kid Reynolds.
We did it.
Wait, no, I'm Joe Brady.
Oh, yeah. You're Joe Brett.
No, don't do that.
Where's
Joe
Joe this week?
Joe, obviously, because of today, has taken the DeLorean to go make sure that his parents boink.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, that is important.
That's an important rite
Yeah.
of passage for every young child.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Earth Angel and everything, and
Yeah.
using guitars that weren't created yet.
Yeah. Enchantment Under the Sea dance.
Yeah.
We did
I'm
it.
your
Fish Under the
density,
Sea
Joe
dance.
Was it?
Brady's mom.
No.
Fish Under the Sea.
Enchantment.
Enchantment.
I think
Yeah,
I'm pretty
that's
sure
what I
that that's
said.
what his sister says at the beginning
Yeah,
of the movie.
she does.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. I don't
Enchantment
remember.
under the sea. Some sort
I've
of
had enough Back to the
mating
Future,
ritual.
to be
Courting
honest.
ritual. I can't remember.
I've had too much Back to the Future right now.
Point is, Joe's parents boinked, and now he's here, but not here.
Right, because he has to go.
Yeah.
He has to go there
Otherwise-
so that he can be here.
Right. But anyway, enough Back to the Future.
Yes.
Back to comics.
Quick announcement before
Yeah.
we get back to comics.
Okay, that first.
Thank you to our Patreon episode sponsors,
Yay.
Becca Lewandowski, Addison Appleby, Brandon Hill, and Brian May.
Yay.
Also, special bonus announcement. Happy birthday to my brother Adam,
Yay.
who is not a Patreon sponsor, so technically we shouldn't be wishing him a happy birthday on the air because he didn't pay us $1.
So
But
you
I'm
should go
breaking
beat $1 out
all
of
the
it.
rules.
Well, as long
That's
as
all right.
we're
We'll take
breaking
it
all
out of
the
your lunch
rules,
money.
I think we should also say happy birthday to my brothers.
Michael.
Yeah, but your brother's birthday was
Also
yesterday.
Stupid, forgetful Michael.
Forgetful Michael.
And also Shane.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy too. Happy birthday to everybody whose birthday is this week, even if we didn't say your name.
So I was editing Tales from the Gutters last week, and I don't stay while they record that because I've got better shit to do than listen to that twice. And,
Wow.
no,
Some editorial here from-
You know, I'm just busy. I'm a busy man. And so I was editing it, and you guys started talking about that, which we had talked about the week before. And when you said stupid, forgetful Michael, I couldn't stop laughing for like a good 10 minutes to a joke that is only funny. Yeah.
I'm glad we impeded your progress.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was great. It's my favorite part about editing is not being able to hear what I'm supposed to be editing.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's from an accordion man who only plays Legend of Zelda theme songs outside my window.
Yes.
At first, it was cool. I'm getting kind of tired of it now.
I
2
don't
weeks
understand
in.
how that's possible.
Yeah, 2 weeks in. I'm a little tired of the Song of Storms.
I none.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
crazy
yeah,
guy.
Song of Storms I could see.
Do-do-do-do-do. Just on accordion, just like for hours.
Yeah.
Every time I take my headphones off, I'm like, are you in the room with me?
Only in spirit.
It's not, I mean, also, Guitar Guy on the Corner is gone. If you listen to View from the Gutters, or Out of the Fridge episodes when we record in the middle of the night on Sundays, sometimes in the background you can hear like some guy with an electric guitar just like shredding outside the window. That guy disappeared. I don't know where he is. So, All Points Bulletin, if you've seen Electric Guitar Guy on the Corner, tweet at me.
Maybe you should double check to see what
He was
accordion guy's
there
accordion is made out of.
earlier today.
Was he there earlier today?
Yeah,
The guitar
if
guy
it's
on the
the
corner?
same guy
The
I'm
electric
thinking
guitar guy?
of.
Okay,
Yeah.
never mind. Cancel the APB.
Why don't you just hire
Cancel
these
backup,
people
cancel
to come make
backup.
us a theme song?
Yeah.
Just like grab people from the street.
Oh,
and
I
be
would.
a-
I've actually thought about that a lot of times.
Why
when I
don't we
hear
just
people-
have an accordion song like for the theme? That'd be exciting.
I'd be down with that. He's a good accordion player.
So is he officially part of the unofficial Out of the Fridge house band?
Yeah,
He's
the
not canon,
outside of the house
actually.
band.
Yeah.
We can hear him even though you're outside of the house. Yes, that band.
Could even say he's out of the fridge.
He is also out of the fridge.
Technically,
but
aren't most people outside of refrigerators?
I hope so.
Yeah.
But
Except for anybody who's a superhero's girlfriend.
yeah.
Or women in general. We're in the psychological fridge. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Society's
deep.
fridge.
Wow.
Patriarchy's
Dark.
fridge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, speaking of dark things and
gotta-
patriarchy, Kit, you recommended this book.
Yes.
Wait, what book is it?
I vastly recommend the patriarchy.
I said it in the intro. I said this week on View from the Gutters.
yeah.
That happened already, though, but in post.
Right.
This
In the future, I'll put it in the future past.
this
But yeah, we're reading
books
Speaking
of
of
future
Back to the
past.
Future.
question.
God damn.
The longest title of all time, 52 Aftermath, The Question, 5 Books of Blood, or 5 Lessons of Blood. The original issues had a great 52
Aftermath
Yeah.
Crime Bible.
Oh, that's what it was.
Crime
Yes.
Bible.
There's a middle part I forgot.
Electric Boogaloo.
There was no question
Yeah,
on
it
it.
didn't say the question.
It said Crime Bible, 5 Lessons of Blood.
The 5 Lessons of Blood. And then it became the question, the 5 Books of Blood.
Because
so confusing.
So great was the hubris of DC Comics that they were like, they don't need to know what characters are in this book. They'll just buy it because we put a title on it.
Yeah, man. There's
Doesn't
a title.
everybody want to read about crime Bibles?
Give us money, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that was I remember talking to Trautmann about that while this was coming out, and he was like, "What with this title? Why
Oh, I loved those intro things.
the
With-
pages?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
he did
the
great
Crime
job.
Bible
Him and
pages.
Trautmann
Steve
and
Lieber,
Lieber.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
him and Steve Lieber did those.
Yeah, if you read the
pages.
the trade, Rucka talks about it in the back matter. And he's like, "Oh my god, we put in so much work on this book that we did not need to do. Like, it was completely spun out of control."
But
Yeah.
what's cool about it is that really this is the initial genesis of what has now become kind of a staple of Rucka's work. Is that now a lot of his books, he's continued to work with Eric, and they've continued to create kind of this excellent ambiance-inducing
Oh, yeah,
back
no,
matter.
absolutely.
So it's kind of fun to think of it that way in retrospect, because at the time it was kind of like, oh, that sounds fun, guys. But now it's like, oh, wow, this has actually become kind of a touchstone of your production method.
If you look at Lazarus, on the back of every Lazarus single issue, there is an ad that is fake, that is set
Those-
in the world of Lazarus,
They were in
made by
the
Trautmann.
first trade, at least, too.
A couple of them are.
Yeah,
not
I
all
don't,
of
I don't
them.
think all of them made it in, but yeah, they're made by Eric Trautmann as well. And they're like beautiful fake ads
they
from
look
within
real.
the world.
He
Yeah.
sent me a couple, and I'm like, wait, what?
The credit card ad like totally got me. I was like, that's real.
There's one for a hospital. Mm-hmm. I think it was like fake hearts or something. That
Yeah.
was a good one.
But also Steve Lieber, who he worked with on Whiteout.
And Trautmann worked on with Shooters.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
It's a small world. Oh, sorry.
yeah, it's a small world in the Northwest up here. It's cold. We're all alone. Send help.
There are wolves after us.
But Kate, why did you recommend this series?
Well, pretty much comics aren't just for kids anymore, and that's what I want everyone to understand. I'm sure this is the first time that's ever been conceived.
Oh
of,
no,
so
I didn't
far.
know that. Explain.
Piff, pow, boom.
Explain how.
Yeah, but thank you for God, someone needed to do that. I was waiting for someone to do that. Anyway, picked this because first off, I really, really like Gotham PD, the stories of Gotham PD. I'm a Maggie Sawyer person. I'm obviously a Renee Montoya person. I thought it would be fun, first off, that we go and look at some DC books after the swirling shit torrent that it is right now, to find some other things that are kind of fun with characters that don't really get a whole lot of books and beef, especially action-y fun detective shit.
Yeah.
I became a fan of The Question when my friend Sam Cash back in California, he got super crazy into Vic's Age Question. So, and he was like just hunting like a crazy person when we'd go on our book hunts and just talking about The Question. And when I was looking for books about The Question, I was only really able to find like one or two that were still really in print or able to be found, and this was one of them.
Yeah.
I was stunned by some of the gorgeous graphic design work in this book, and of course super duper excited to have lady cops.
Everybody loves Lady Cops.
I love lady cops. All about lady cops. And so since Renee was somebody that I had enjoyed since I was a little one, watching Batman the Animated Series, it seemed like a good fit for me. So once I had read it, I thought, well, if I'm going to haul something in here for you to talk about, I would like to haul in a female-fronted book with some exciting adventure. I think a lot of the time when you get female-fronted books across things, that they're kind of, I don't know, like most of the stuff you tend to find is kind of softer, kind of jokier. Like, like I was finding with Black Canary and Zatanna's book, it's a lot more comedic, goofy, or kind of, you know, funsies.
It's lighter for
yeah,
ladies.
And yeah, exactly. For light days.
Our brains can't handle that.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want all that darkness in your life. Why would you want any contrast
Totally,
to
yeah.
light and humor?
I love crime books, and I love books with this darkness and intensity without getting too, I am the night.
Yeah.
Which I don't think the question really runs that far into that territory, so I thought it'd be a fun read.
Oh, I think it's in the wheelhouse of Greg Rucka, too, with works we've seen
totally.
before, with like Whiteout and now with Stumptown.
The three separate times I've tried to talk to Greg Rucka again about like how he writes his characters, and of course women, like I always end up so tongue-tied and happy getting to talk to him because he lets female heroes be heroes.
Yeah.
And isn't about, oh, I'm writing a female hero. He's
Right.
like, I'm writing a hero just like any other hero that I would write. So there's not
Yeah.
a whole bunch of that crap shoehorned in to make sure everybody knows this is a female. you know?
Well, and I think that sometimes we see one of two things with female heroes that I'm really glad doesn't happen to Renee in any of the question stories. One, I think we either see the author like coddle them and give
Yeah.
them plot armor, so they never really feel like they're in any kind of danger because they're like worried, like, oh, well, I can't do anything to this person because they're a woman, so they'll never really get hurt. They'll never really seem like anything is at stake, and they're just kind of protected from everything. Or we'll see a brutalization of that character that seems to be to the benefit of no one except, hey, look, we're beating up a woman.
Yeah.
Like the Tomb Raider, the video game, I think is the new one is well, the first one of the reboot was like very like in that vein where it's just like she's just gonna get beat up a lot. Why? Well, so you can watch her get beat up a lot. It's
Well,
like,
they always
I-
describe writing this like as if it's a fine line
yeah,
between like beating the shit out of a female character and just not touching them at all.
Right.
Which it's really not. But for some reason, there's this
no,
mentality.
it's like a
that it
5-lane
is.
highway. There's like a lot
Yeah,
of in between.
they're like, I'm
in
not
there.
really sure, you know, like either way I go, someone would be mad. And it's like, no, you could just be a better writer. Try
Yeah.
that.
But I mean,
Thanks, Greg.
I think that there is one that you missed, which is taking a strong female character, one who has a career, who's skilled at doing something, and make her be a surrogate mother.
Yeah.
And
God.
go, oh my God, look at
gotta
all that
rescue
you've given
this
up in your
baby.
life because you're not a mommy. Here is a object or a person or,
Or a
whatever
dragon.
that makes you like you are the surrogate mother of, and now you have to
Right.
take care of that thing.
Yeah.
Joss, I'm still pissed at you for that empty womb bullshit. But, there's that.
I have no idea what you're talking about,
No,
but
I'm just
I
still thinking about
I
the
agree with.
Avengers.
Oh, Avengers. Yeah, that's fine.
Still pissed about that.
And I don't mean that's fine by what he did. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, it's totally.
we've treaded that ground,
Yeah.
and the anger
The anger is real.
is real.
I'm also a
struggle
little
is
mad
real.
at Kevin Smith for some of that in his Daredevil.
Yeah.
Being like, Black Widow, get to babysitting. That's what you're good at, right?
Well, he also makes Matt babysit in that.
Well,
too.
Matt is a baby himself,
That's
so it's
true.
more
That's
like
fair.
dogs and horses. Like, you
Yeah.
know. Like
Here,
horses
horse, take
watching
care of this
horses
goat.
watching dogs, yeah.
Yeah, I think this whole kind of grittiness with the veneer of realism in a superhero setting or in a action fantasy setting is why we love books like Bitch Planet and High Crimes and stuff, because they feel dark, but they're not grim dark to the point where you have, Batman versus Superman or Man of Steel or whatever. But you also feel like things are at stake. The
Yeah.
characters are going to die.
There's still like an air of the fantastic around it. And I think that's really important for superhero stories. And if you take that away, so why are you bothering to write a story about a superhero
Yeah.
if you're not going to make it fantastic
Right.
in some way?
Yeah. Oh, well, you want it to be real and believable.
Yeah.
Like a guy actually dressed up in a bat suit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Night of Owls.
But
Thank you, any Batman movie except Batman Forever.
Lordy.
The best one.
my favorite.
I hate all of you.
Somewhere
Kiss
Joe
from a
is
rose
seething.
6 times. That's all I need to say. That was that whole soundtrack.
Which was the
swear to
Arnold
God.
one?
That soundtrack's actually really good.
That was Batman and Robin.
Batman and Robin.
Oh, yeah,
that
that was my
the last
favorite.
one. That one's also excellent.
On ice.
When they click their heels together and ice skates come out.
Yep. Oh my
The
god.
best. The best. Don't they also stop for like Burger King on the way to go
Yeah,
fight?
something like that.
Yeah.
Then they like pay with like the Bat credit card? Or was
Yeah.
that just a commercial that
And
came
it was
out?
like-
Leave home
in the movie.
without
He
it.
And it
whips out his
said
credit card. It's
Batman-
like, never leave home without it.
That's in the
right.
movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and then
Absolutely.
so it says Batman, and then the expiration date says forever.
Oh my god.
God,
That's
yes.
brilliant.
Beautiful.
That's the best thing I've ever heard.
Chris Nolan, take notes.
But yeah, so I'm kind of curious because, Brant, I know you and I have talked a lot about DC in the 2005 era and our feelings kind of post Infinite Crisis, because setting the stage for this a little bit, this book is a direct continuation of the Renee Montoya story that would start in 52, which was the direct follow-up to Infinite Crisis, but also to Gotham Central, Renee's story in Gotham Central, in which she tries to, well, in Gotham Central, her partner gets killed. She goes to the guy she knows murdered her partner's house and is about to pull the trigger on him, and then walks out after having turned in her badge and gun and leaving the department.
Please say it again.
Well, after turning in her badge.
Turning your badge in. Like that.
like that?
Yeah, like that. Turning your badge.
Yeah.
Yeah, cop story, yeah.
Yeah, cops. So, Brand, I'm kind of curious, like, have you read this in between the last time you read it in, like, the late 2005
No.
era? You read it before, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel on the reread?
I like it less, and I didn't like it that much at the time. I'm trying to remember the placement of some stuff. Batwoman had been happening at this point, right? Or
No.
it just was getting ready to
Yeah,
start.
she was introduced in 52.
52.
Right.
This is the direct follow-up to that where she returns, and then I don't think that we see her again until Batwoman Elegy, which is...
No, we see her one more time before that.
Okay.
The follow-up to this book is Final Crisis Revelations, which is a
Okay.
5-issue miniseries
Right.
dealing with Crispus Allen becoming the
Spectre.
Spectre. Both Renee and Batwoman are directly involved in that story. But the next time after Final Crisis Revelation is
and it's after
Batwoman
that
Elegy.
1 year later happens, right?
No, 1 year later happened immediately after Infinite Crisis ended. And then after like a few months of, or maybe even immediately after that. it
Immediately
was
after
like, yeah.
Infinite Crisis ended, every comic jumped 1 year later, and
Right.
52
Okay.
began.
Right. And 52 was that 1 year.
Right.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
Confusing.
So this basically was the 1 year later.
Well, it was the 1 year missing. Like you would you would jump into Robin or whatever after Infinite Crisis and be like, "Man, that sure was a crazy year that you were gone, Bruce." And he's like, "Yep, I was doing what," and like a year had gone by, a year without Batman, Superman, or Wonder Woman. And 52 is the story of what happens to the DC universe when Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman kind of step down.
Yeah, and then this happens right after that 52.
Right.
Yeah, this is 52 Aftermath.
Right.
In series order. Yeah, it's really confusing. I wonder why people have a hard time reading Crisis Era
I had
DC and
actually
figuring it
forgotten
out.
about 1 year later, so I apparently was in comics longer than I thought
Yeah,
I was, because I remember the 1 year later.
that was in 2005. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
okay.
But anyway,
And this came out in 2007.
okay. So, the trade did or the singles?
The singles.
Okay. So,
And the trade came out in 2008.
okay. But yeah, so you were saying, Brant, you didn't like it that much to begin with.
Yeah, I didn't like it that much to begin with, and reading it again kind of reminded me, the thing about 52 was that it kind of was in a lot of ways, that era was the apex of everything that DC was kind of on its way to being, right? Like the big argument, at least from my perspective, and I feel like if you go back and look at the various commentary, this was a relatively common observation, was that, coming out of the 90s, Marvel had the art, DC had the story. And so part of what DC was struggling with was kind of making it so that their stories looked good. And so leading up to Infinite Crisis and then the 52 stuff, it was, well, not only, so 52 in of itself was, it was 52 single 52 weekly comics. It was well drawn. It was well written. For the most part, I mean, compared to a lot of stuff at its time, especially in its genre, right? Like, I'll make some caveats for this.
And it had 4 really high-profile writers.
I'd say the writing was fantastic. The art,
for the most part, there certainly
weekly.
were some times. Yeah, I mean, but I feel like that was true for everybody. Like, I feel like the mid-aughts was the kind of this period of time where it was like you get some really interesting art going, and then it would totally fall apart. And it wasn't until, really 2010s and forward where it seems like there's been a stronger push to like make the art and the writing contiguous. Like somebody finally noticed this thing that I have a big problem with, and it's one of my problems with this book. Oh, hey, when we change the art style all the time, it diminishes the efficacy of the story.
And we've talked about this before, like, is it worth it to replace an artist on a book so that you can meet deadlines if once you've collected it, it's more jarring to readers to realize that, like, oh, the art changes every so often.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's not really a win in that situation. Either your books are all late and they start to slip out of continuity.
And you get fired.
Stuff like Astonishing X-Men.
Right.
And then where everything slips out of continuity and we don't know when Colossus, like, comes back and also dies because that book was so late. Or you have stuff like this where it comes out on time and it fits neatly into the continuity. However, the art suffers because you have to make sacrifices to get stuff out on time. And whether that means paying fill-in artists or getting art to artists who are fast enough to put the book out on time. Which I think
there was so much shit happening in the DC universe when this was coming out that writers were stretched, or artists were stretched so thin.
Yeah, they did have a lot of stuff.
Well, and I feel like I mean, I get the impression from the way this book is laid out that there was a clear editorial decision that was made even probably before they fully fleshed out the concept for the book, that they were like, if this is going to be a multi-chapter type of thing, as soon as Greg says, this is my pitch, this is how I'm going to break it out, that they said, great, we'll give you a different artist for each one. That'll ease up our resources, and then maybe each parable that you're kind of working with in each issue will kind of have its own feel to it.
Right. Which could have worked.
I think it could have. I think the problem I have in particular is that there's a couple of folks in this book who I enjoy their art greatly. They're artists that I know from other DC properties at the time, but I think that there was a very clear artistic decision in this series to ink everything in a much heavier way, to give everything that dark feeling, and I think it really threw me off. I will make this comment. I read mine digitally. The scans don't help the art.
No, they don't.
Because they make things look matte. But when it's printed on the glossy paper that is common for this time, and is it what's in the trade, it actually looks a lot better. So I might not have been as driven off by it reading it physically than I was.
There's a specific issue in here, and it's the one where she goes to the professor, and the professor is going to stab his wife with the scissors.
Yeah. Deceit, that's the first one.
Yeah, and she kicks the scissors out of his hand, and then the wife stabs him. That book, to me, looks like late 90s, early 2000s inking, where it's like lots of action lines, really heavy shadows, and like almost cross-stitching in the... It's very busy outside of the figure work. And that's always my least favorite form of inking, especially in an era of modern colors, where all of that shadow should have been colored shadow to help add depth to the scene, instead now has to be taken up with this just pure black inking. Yeah. I think that and opening with that as the first story is really rough, because I feel like the art continually gets better after that, and I end up liking the story more. But it's hard to get into the beginning of the story, I think, because that art is much older.
Yeah.
And by the time we get to issue 5, like that fight in the rain at the end on the boat, like I feel like things finally solidify.
Right.
And like that's what I wanted the series kind of to look like the whole time. But it's hard in a book like this where you have so many figure model or like body type model issues with Renee Montoya, where every artist wants to draw her a
slightly
little
differently.
And it just like... It's not bad to the point where I want to put the book down, but it is off-putting sometimes when I look at her and I'm like, wow, this artist really wanted to make her look like Tomb Raider.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I have that concern. As far as characters that Rucka has worked with, I think I made a comment a while ago, and I can't remember what episode or what book we were talking about, I don't think it was while we were actually reading a Rucka book, but it came up in another conversation where I feel like my one concern with Greg has been that off and on his tendency has been, and I think the question is where this first starts to rear its head in a more overt way, is I'm going to get rid of the previous character and replace it with kind of a grittier, harder female version of that character. And like Renee Montoya has always been a weird character for me in so much that she has such distinctly sometimes different characterizations depending on what source you're looking at.
Right.
You know, like I think a lot of folks got exposed to her first with Bullock in, Batman, the animated series,
that's where she
right?
started.
Right.
That's her origin.
So you see her there, and she's kind of got like this eye-rolling, clipped edge to her because she's with Bullock, and she's like,
the
you're
straight
such a
man.
pig.
Right,
yeah,
yeah,
like you're an asshole kind of a thing. And then
That's
like
ironic now that I think about it, that she's the straight man.
yeah. But so yeah, like. And then, you get into GCPD, and then that entire thing unfolds, and then she becomes the Question. And
well, she's in No Man's Land a bunch, too. Like, she was in Detective Comics, like, throughout kind of the late 90s.
So, I mean, I think, unfortunately, you get that kind of inconsistent tone that comes from a lot of different people wanting to fiddle with her. I think that Vic Sage is such a strange character. Like, he always felt strange being imported into the Gotham family.
Yeah.
Like, he fits sort of, but not quite. And then he's had really interesting tone changes. I think that most people identify with or tend to gravitate towards the Justice League Unlimited version of the Question as kind of being like their seminal
our
version.
generation,
and then our generation, right? But then there are people who kind of remember him from the Charleston days coming into the comics in the 80s.
There's also that
80s.
awesome run, the Denny O'Neil run, like that 37-issue run of the Question that kind of like redefined him.
And I was looking back into this because I was trying to remember, because I've read a bunch of it, but it's been a long time. And of course, he like had this whole thing where the Question is grappling with objectivism and all this stuff. But then when they kind of reboot him in the 90s, and then he's a Buddhist, and he's not objectivism. It's about like this weird kind of spiritual bent thing, but then they've tied elements of the Question's mythos now, especially with Montoya, into kind of the League of Assassins, all that stuff. But then there's this issue of the crime Bible, and I'll say this for DC. DC has been much more willing to put out there religious fanaticism as a reason for terrorism. Like Cobra, these guys, like I think Marvel has tended to shy away from like they're a bunch of religious fanatics, and, and DC's much more willing to let folks be like, like they worship snake gods and are super crazy.
Well, DC has allowed religion itself to be more prevalent in their comics, where Marvel generally goes towards they're aliens,
right? And so, and the reason I bring this up and that why this book has always felt weird to me is, and I mentioned this when we were talking about Madame Xanadu, magic and that stuff related to it is in a weird spot. So it's like you've got people who are walking around in this book who are like, crime Bible, hocus pocus, religious stuff, and it's like you have an angel of God on the JLA. Yeah. Like he was an angel of God on the JLA. You have that's about as literal as it gets. So it's weird to have characters walking around dealing with sort of metaphysical questions where it's like you have weird established metaphysical principles in your stuff. I feel like by the time Rucka got to Batwoman, and this was trying to figure out my timeline, he had hammered out kind of the Bible of crime, like that whole thing into a much finer shape than it was here. And maybe he had to go through this process to make it work better in Batwoman.
Well, I think also just responding to the point about the spirit of vengeance on the JLA is like,
I'm not talking about Spectre. I'm talking about Zariel. Zuriel.
Azrael.
No, not Azrael. That's the Batman guy.
Right.
It's Zuriel. He's the actual white angel with wings, gold sword.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Zuriel.
Yeah.
But I guess it always brings to mind, and every DC book treats it differently, like how much does the average citizen know about the DCU proper and superheroes? Right. Because sometimes in the DCU, and this goes all the way back to pre-Crisis era stuff, they'll be like, oh, what's the multiverse? And then like a cop on the street will explain the multiverse to someone. And you're like, does everyone really know that there's like multiple, is that like a commonplace
it's
thing?
actually part of training for the police force. They just hand them this little manual.
Like,
actually,
it's like,
it might make sense.
Oh, totally,
The multiverse in you may see a copy of yourself.
The multiverse and you.
Multiversal crime.
Isn't that why Metropolis has the science police?
I'm sure
Specifically because it's like, mad scientists are rolling up all the time, like with giant robots and time portals and all this crazy shit. And we need a police squad that's equipped to handle this.
I think that's Bendis kind of tackled that in Powers with like this, like they respond to metacrime related. They're like a specific crime unit that deals only with metacrime.
Yeah.
And I think that the DC universe definitely has something like probably has something like that.
I couldn't maybe not agree more.
Yeah. So I don't know how much the average citizen knows about like that guy with the wing. Like, what is he? So I do think that there is still room for people to have doubts about.
Yeah,
faith.
no,
and also the one guy who seems to be doubting the most
he's actually
turns out to actually be in that.
And then he gets murdered by his wife, which is harsh.
That is harsh, but that's how that religion rolls, man. It's all about murder.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think it was more. It wasn't so much about his innate skepticism. It was like he was like eye rolling, like telling all these other people in the bookstore, like these people believe in this, but isn't that crazy? And it's
Atheist 1, Christian 0.
Yeah.
Boom.
Am I right? Am I right, everybody?
Hey.
But it's like you got a lady down the street who literally dresses in fishnets, says shit backwards, and like portals to other dimensions appear. Like, come on, people.
Well, I'm sure that there are those people in the DC universe who goes, oh, well, she's just manipulating quantum mechanics or whatever, or she's an alien, or she's from another. Like, this is scientifically explainable. Like, magic isn't magic. It's just that you're doing science that you don't know how it works.
Even in Young Justice, there was an
like
issue
Abracadabra
of that, where Flash was talking about Dr. Fate, and he's like, nah, it's all science. Like, it's clearly all science, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on a certain level it is, insofar as science is just a description of what
science
we understand
is just
about
magic
the
we
universe.
don't understand yet.
Yeah.
Jane Foster.
Yeah.
Isn't it the other way around?
Magic is
Science.
science.
Yeah, science is just magic we don't understand yet.
Science is just magic we don't understand it.
I don't. Is it?
Mind blown.
I don't think. Whoa. I don't think that's accurate. Okay, well that's fine. But yeah, you continue. You were talking about you were talking about Greg hammering out the
So I feel like there are, hindsight being what it is, there is a stronger kind of more, I don't know, natural setting, natural sitting version of this like faith of crime sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's like this question feels out of place as a concept and as a character. Like it's always felt kind of weirdly wedged in, and then Montoya's always felt kind of weirdly not wedged in, but like I've never known exactly where I stand with her as far as what do I think of her as like the prime version of her character. And clearly Greg did more with her than anybody else over the years, so I tend to believe what he says of her.
Didn't he like sort of invent Renee Montoya?
No, not really. Basically, she was the cartoon character.
Right.
And then she was brought into the Batman comics, I think, along with Harley Quinn around the time of No Man's
Quinn
Land.
situation.
But I don't
as a
think
background
fan
character.
favorite.
But she wasn't really approaching the
didn't have
comics
a
until
name.
GCPD.
Right. And Gotham Central with Rucka is when her character really became fleshed out. And
She did have a name.
In the cartoon?
Yeah.
Oh.
And her appearances in the 90s.
Bullock was always like Montoya.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Greg really really fleshed her out as a character, and what we know as Montoya is because of him.
Well, I think that the Crisis era, like end of the Crisis era, late 2000s era, Renee Montoya was the one that Greg wrote because he's the only one who touched her after Gotham Central.
Right.
So, I mean, he definitely had a lot to do with that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, when this was pitched, I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to reread all of Gotham Central because I want to get the feeling. And so actually,
Gotham Central again.
I read everything with Renee Montoya in it from then until the modern era. So 10 years of Renee Montoya, which is actually a surprisingly small amount of stuff because
surprising.
It's like 5 trades.
It's
Well,
40
Gotham Central's like 5 or 6 trades.
It's 40 issues of Gotham Central. It's 52, but not all of 52. In fact, I read a fan edit of
it's
52.
Like 175 pages of 52.
It's less than 100. It's less than 200 pages in 52. And some of those are fan edit pages where they're like 2 panels of Renee Montoya and then everything else is deleted because it's like not important, which was really interesting. And then I read this, and then I read Final Crisis Revelation, and then I read
the other trade,
the
basically,
backups,
which were the backups to the other
Batwoman Elegy, which is called The Question
Pipeline.
Thank you. And then I read Convergence, The Question 1 and 2, which came out last year.
Well, she does have a small... She does show up in Blackest Night.
She has one issue in Blackest Night, which is The Question 38.
Yeah.
Because it's the... But it barely ties in, because it's basically her fighting
Shiva,
her dead friends.
Isn't that literally every issue of Blackest Night?
Because of zombies.
Yeah, she fights Vic.
Doesn't she
something else happens?
Well, doesn't she get into a fight with either Shiva or one of them because she's trying to draw out Crispus Allen?
I don't remember.
And then Vic interrupts that fight, or no, she gets attacked by one of them. I think by Lady Shiva, who's actually trying to draw out Vic.
Yeah.
But you don't know that till after the fight because she's like, I wasn't actually trying to attack you, Renee. I know that you have the skills. Which I like that era of Lady Shiva shows up to test random people throughout the DC universe to make sure that they are, quote, on the level.
1990 through 2010 Lady Shiva.
Yeah, where it's just like, it's funny. I have a friend who's been watching wrestling. And I bring this up because apparently there's an era of wrestling in the late 90s, maybe, where basically the wrestler Cain shows up at the end of every single episode and just basically choke slams everyone and then walks away. So, like, no plot ever resolves. And I was thinking about this today about Lady Shiva, where it's just like, okay, so she's basically that. She just shows up and is like, do you have the skills? What? You have skills. I'm going to go now. And it's like, what?
But with less choke slams.
And less choke slams, more high kicks.
Sort of disappointing.
Yeah.
So,
anyway,
I was kind of curious to hear from some people who don't read a lot of The Question, namely you, Kaylee. I've been kind of wanting to see if you would say some words.
Oh, yeah.
Just this is another reason I picked this book is because I wanted to hear what you had to say about it specifically, because I'm a big dork.
Yeah, well, sorry, I've been like super out of it today. I don't know why. No, this was really interesting to read because I haven't actually read anything of The Question, Vic or Renee. Everything I know about The Question is from Justice League,
which is awesome.
Yeah, which is perfect, and really all you need to know about DC ever. But this was interesting. I don't know. I was reading it and I was trying to figure out where it fit in another storyline. And I was like going through it and I was like, God, am I just like really dumb and my reading comprehension is just not there? Because I feel like things happened and I just missed it. Apparently they happened in books before this.
Yep.
And then when it ended, I was like, oh, there is no real resolution. There kind of was, but not really. Did I miss that? And apparently there are books after this.
Yeah.
Which I was so angry about because there is like nowhere to find out where it continues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the fun things that you run into with characters like this is that, if it's not one of the huge whatever characters, you really do have to do a lot of digging when you're interested in a character that's not like a main book thing.
Maybe my Google Foo isn't that strong, but I could not find out where this continued.
See, I'm a frequent user of things like, like wikis for this sort of stuff. And one of the things that always astounds me is that I always somehow find these characters that it's near fucking impossible to find this shit for. And like this was the case when my friend like Sam was getting into The Question and stuff, is that between myself and Anthony and Sam, we would always have to kind of like collaborate together on research and come up with these stupid lists to read everything we could find about a character that we liked. And at that point, we would just go on mad hunts to find every book that this person appeared in if we had an interest. And another reason that I picked this was because I wanted to see how well somebody who maybe wasn't as familiar with the character felt this story was self-contained and understandable, as in any way a way to like introduce someone to this character. I'm always kind of like backhandedly book pitching to my patrons, or because I have a lot of comic readers at the library who come talk to me, and I'm never quite sure how to hand them something from a perspective of someone who may not be as familiar with the character. And given that there is, of course, a lack of good female-fronted books, in the DC world where a male hero or a main hero from, like, Justice League or something doesn't show up and, like, push the narrative along with their own power and presence.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious to see maybe what that experience was for you. That's...
Yeah, it was weird. So I feel like in most self-contained books that I tried to pitch, it will have some sort of explanation of how a certain character's power set will work, or just some level of introduction or backstory. Mm-hmm. This one kind of really jumps into it, and it was definitely interesting and fun to read. But as far as an intro to the character, this might be the best thing that's available, but it would be sad if it was sort of a thing.
There really is.
I think you're right on both counts.
But that's the case, though.
It's fun to read.
There's kind of a lack of way to kind of do this without like grabbing somebody else's book with that character in it and going, oh, okay, well, you could sort of read this, but it's not really about her. It's about everybody else. And that happens so frequently with characters like this, where it's like, well, if you want to understand them or enjoy them or get to know them, you have to like go in the middle of someone else's story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another really kind of unfortunate thing about this, is that if you have an interest in these kind of characters, it's like, well, where do I start? I guess the only thing available, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess on this side, it's one of those, like, people tell you not to complain about half a loaf of bread situations, and that's kind of where I am with this character.
Yeah.
It's like, gee, I would really like a nice loaf of bread. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, this one over here fell on the ground and it's got, some crumbs on it and stuff, but it's still totally bread. And you can kind of dust it off and like see some of what you wanted underneath. And I don't think it's like a horrible book or anything. I just think it's what you have available, and
it is the middle of a story.
Yeah. And, considering that Greg is on it, it's a little easier for me to kind of turn to someone and go, not a full loaf, but hey, at least, I don't know, it's rye.
There's a lot of that in the world of comic books, and I think the most of that is located in the big two, where people are like, I want to read a story about that person. And you're like, all right, well, let me give you the 10-minute backstory of why you don't need to read 3/4 of 52. You just need to skip every page with other characters in it. Mm. But then when you get to the question and Batwoman stuff, read that part and then pick up this part. And it's like, you have to do that a lot with the big two comics, because
it's one of the most frustrating things I've ever come across.
Yeah.
And that was 80% of working in a comic book store, was like trying to get people caught up enough to where you felt like you could hand them a book and they wouldn't bring it back.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
And what's so frustrating too is that New 52 was supposed to resolve that.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be an introduction to these characters where you could go in not knowing anything and learn about these characters, and it failed on that so hard, and characters like the question would have benefited so much from that.
Well, it's why I was excited about it at first, was because I was like, a fresh reboot, finally I will be able to hand comic book people stuff. But they didn't reboot,
except I think they did give a fresh reboot of the question. It's back to being Vic Sage, and I think they cleaned up his continuity. So I think, unfortunately, in the case of this character, so here's my nosebleed.
Well, and Renee was in Batwoman. Yeah. Renee went back to being a cop in the New 52. So, parts of this...
But not for a little while. Like, she didn't show up right away.
Oh, no. Well, when she first showed up, she was retired, married with kids.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah, a lot of people were really upset about it.
I don't remember.
They kind of... Yeah.
Some erasure going on there.
Yeah.
Well, you look, for example, again, at, like, Marvel Now... and how they're handling a lot of these characters that were otherwise obscure or didn't have a whole lot of interest in them, and like rebooting them and giving them their own books. This is probably just because I like read Squirrel Girl recently or whatever, but they did a pretty good job of taking some of these characters that are a little weirder or more obscure and making them interesting enough with this reboot that it's like, oh, well, this is a chick. Her barracks come from squirrels. It's a little goofy. We know it's goofy, whatever. Here's a new book. And giving people an opportunity to kind of look at that character without being like, oh, I need to hunt down every Squirrel Girl that ever was, and all these Iron Man books or things like that.
And tonally, they're all different, because you look at another character book where they went back and sort of like dusted off and went to clean up Danny Rand with the Immortal Iron Fist. With that in the only, like, that is a completely different tone, look, feel.
And they allow that to happen, and that's kind of a good thing. They allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get the impression from various dribs and drabs, both what was happening at the time and, of course, what Rucka has said in various pieces of press and all this stuff, that I think with the question, there was kind of a stated assumption that his efforts in the 52 would give him an opportunity to actually like put a book together for Renee Montoya as the question and actually have it sitting on the shelves next to some of these other books. And like either for whatever reason, they just decided not to do that, whether that was because they didn't feel like it was strong enough or there was some kind of miscommunication. I doubt it was probably they decided to change their minds and or somebody somewhere was like, who knows? Is the question really going to be able to move books? We don't even think it's worth trying, kind of a thing. Like a weird thing. Like, or like when they named it 52 Aftermath Crime Bible Lessons of Blood, then they were like, our research is showing no one's interested in the question. It's like, well, maybe put the fucking question on the cover of the page, right?
It's like learning the wrong lessons from market data. We talk about that all the time.
So, I mean, I think that and it's funny because I've said this to Tobias, and I think I've said on the show too, which is I think sometimes the lessons that are learned are the wrong ones in that people will continue to push books of characters. Like the big two will continue to push books of characters that it's like if you don't have a great story to tell about them, they don't need to have a fucking book.
Yeah, right.
Like Moon Knight almost got there and kind of went, and then they managed to keep bringing in some decent creators for it. But it was like, you know what? Nobody got hurt that Moon Knight didn't show up for 15 years. No one's going to get hurt that the question doesn't get shown up for 15 years. If no one has a good story to tell. On the flip side, if someone has a good story to tell...
Right, put the book out.
Like if somebody walks up and is like, I've got this thing that I want to put together for like 30 issues of Hawkeye, like give them a shot. Like let them do it and see how it holds. But
there is an issue with that, though, which is trademark law.
Right,
there are
so they have to
characters
keep using
where they're
them.
like, we got to throw out 6 issues of this just to maintain the copyright. So we're going to just give it to somebody, be like, here, write this.
And I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that because someone out there somewhere has a great idea for Squirrel Girl.
Or how about the fact that when something doesn't work once for one type of character, sometimes that's okay.
Yeah.
Like in the sense of like, hey, it doesn't... This Batman story sucks ass.
Right.
Nobody turns around and goes, oh, well, fuck, we're not going to do that.
Yeah,
but obviously that's Batman.
Right.
But it's a little bit different when it's like, we've got this character that's tied into this other thing that's really popular, so it's okay if we fuck up the first time.
Right.
Because they still get explored in other books.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where you reach a problem here, is when it's like when some characters and some types of characters never get a chance to have a good story told about them because, movies about female superheroes don't do good, which is why we don't make movies about female superheroes. That's probably because we don't give them a chance. That's probably because if a female superhero book or like movie fails, then it's easier for everyone to turn and go, oh, see, we can't make any now. It's too big of a risk.
Right.
But yet you can make 90 shitty Batman movies.
Yeah. No, it absolutely is that it is getting the wrong market data, like reading the market data wrong. This happened to Greg Rucka in film. They take one of the best comics he's ever written, Whiteout, and they turn it into the worst movie ever made.
And they turn around and go, "Oh, see, these things don't sell."
People don't want to.
But at the same time, shitty things do sell.
That movie did not make its money back at all.
Like I thought it was all right.
It tanked, though. I mean, like for a studio, that's a failure. And so they're like, Greg, we're never going to let you make
money
a movie
is what it
again.
Comes down
There's an
to.
unnecessary Kate Beckinsale shower scene.
There's a lot of that whole movie. I don't know if you can defend that movie at all. But the point is that it did poorly, and now they won't make Greg's stuff into movies anymore.
And the stakes are higher when it's something like the stakes are way higher again when it's something like, well, this is a risk anyway because it's a female-fronted action-y cop movie, which means we can't make any movies.
The lesson to learn from Whiteout was not don't make another Greg Rucka movie. It's just don't fucking make bad movies.
Exactly,
like
and
that's the lesson.
And I think sometimes it's not people learning the wrong lesson. It's people who have an idea in their head and they fuck things up on purpose to justify their idea.
They're looking for evidence to prove.
I'm specifically thinking about what happened to Stephanie Brown and Cassandra Cain in the New 52 when they're like, oh, we can't do those characters because they're toxic and they fuck everything up. And I don't want to speak out of turn here because I've only heard part of this story, but from what I understand, there's some bad blood between Rucka and DC because they wanted him to sign a contract or something to go exclusive with them that he didn't want to do. And again, I don't know all the details here, but basically they went Splitsville, and I would not put it beyond certain people at DC Editorial to go, okay, well, if Greg is not going to work with us, we're just going to fuck up these characters just to piss him off. Because we can.
Well, it's the reason they let a lot of his books go out of print, and it's the reason that they took characters like Batwoman, which was a character he spent all this time like building into something, and we're like, well, I mean, we can just ignore everything that he did.
Yeah, and I think probably part of the reason why Renee Montoya is not the Question anymore is because she is a character who's closely associated with Greg Rucka. Well, and there's bad blood there.
Except that she is the Question again, and they brought Greg back to write Convergence, the Question. So maybe the bad blood is going away.
Maybe they've worked things out, whatever.
Maybe the people who were not supposed to be saying the things they were said are no longer where they were. But I think that, I mean, that happens with when
maybe they realized the New 52 was shitty and they need Greg Rucka back to help fix it.
Maybe they did realize that. But, I mean, that happens between editorial and writers. There is bad blood. But
what I'm saying is that it may not just be a situation where they're going, oh, this book didn't sell very well, so we're not going to do this thing. It may be a situation where they intentionally fucked up the book and put a random title on it so that people wouldn't buy it.
It could be.
That because somebody, I mean, it's just like when a TV executive comes in and cancels a bunch of TV shows because they don't get to take credit for it, even if it's doing well.
Right.
Like, I mean, that kind of thing happens.
It's business and it's shitty business. But, I mean, this is, again, one of the reasons why we like creator-owned books is because this kind of shit doesn't happen to Invincible. I mean, right?
Ideally, yeah.
Well, I mean, that book is being rebooted.
Yeah, but by its own creator. He's going, you know, it'd be funny if I rebooted. Wouldn't that be hilarious? I'm going to do that. Like, that's, there's a time skip coming up in my other book. Oh, wouldn't that be hilarious if I did that? Like, he gets to do what he wants. That's the point, right? In a perfect world, Greg would have gotten to do what he wanted, and we would have gotten 100 Question stories, and they all would have been excellent. And having gone back and read all of those...
novels.
Yeah, and having gone back and read all of those, I'm fucking pissed off that we didn't get all that. Because everything I read about the Question, this being the middle of a story, I think hurts it as the one trade you can actually hand to people. I think the Kaylee and Kit are both right on that, where it's like, this isn't the best introduction, but it's the best we have.
Yeah.
Despite all of that, I still feel like every Question story that Greg wrote is awesome, and I want more of it. Up to and including the Convergence story, where Helena... well, I don't remember her last name. It's not Wayne. It's Bertinelli.
Bertinelli.
Yeah, where she may or may not be dating the Question now. Like, I like... And now has to work with their ex, Batwoman, or her ex, Batwoman. Like... I like that triangle of like what is going on. I think that there's so many good stories to tell from this, and I love this story for two reasons. One is because I love the arc that he spent 10 years working on, which was Gotham Central. I think one of the best Bat family books ever to have been put out, up through now. I think that he did such a great job curating the Question, and I love it for that. I also love it because I feel like this takes a large page out of one of my favorite movies, The Ninth Gate.
Oh,
in which someone has to go collect Bibles or books. And I love that.
Another, I don't know, to speak to some of the positives of the book, again, with that whole half loaf of bread thing.
Yeah.
I am happy that I get to have any kind of book again where you've got a female detective or cop that gets to do and experience the shit that all these other, famous like male detectives get to do. You've got the seductive situation. You've got, like hardcore action. You've got real detective work. You've got a history with a dame,
You've got
that
superhero.
Actually works with you. And,
You've got superhero shit going on too, on top of all of that. This isn't like just Stumptown again.
She gets to do stuff that is fun stuff without, say, like Batman showing up and being like, here's how I found this thing. Here's all the information and a plot dump. Anyway, I showed up to boost sales on this book. See you later. And I find that I mean, other than Batwoman being in there, who has a legitimate reason to be in there, not just showing up and boosting sales of a book. I find that a lot of times, again, in female-fronted books, you get a whole lot of like chick potpourri, I call it, where it's just kind of like, well, we've got this book with a chick in it. How are we going to sell it? Shit, we could write a good story for her. We could, maybe have an arc, good writing and plot and shit. Or, oh, hey, here's this other character who's also a female from another book. We'll just put her in there because there might be some people who give a shit about her. And like, that's where I have a little bit of trouble, for example, with like Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel feels like it's so all over the place sometimes, because I feel like sometimes that book exists just to fuck other characters into it. And
like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Where it's like, hey, look, Guardians of the Galaxy is popular. Let's throw in that fucking raccoon. Or, hey...
You can't say bad things about Bradley Cooper.
I don't like Guardians of the Galaxy, but like, or like they put Monica in there too at one point, and it's like,
well, and Spider-Woman's all over in that book.
Yeah, and sometimes
they are
it's
friends,
cool.
But...
Sometimes it's cool to have that, but sometimes I kind of go, well, you could either focus your energy on writing a really good, epic tale for this character. Or you can keep like guest starring it to try to make it look like it's more connected and more interesting than it actually is. And I feel like that happens too much in a lot of these, female-fronted books. And one of the things I do like about this is that she kind of has her own sort of story without it having to be about, some big name showing up and making the book legitimate.
Yeah, I can see that. I think the flip side of that, though, that's tough is... this story is so intimately tied to everything that was going on at DC at the time.
Yeah.
Being a direct follow-up to 52, that it has almost a different problem of like, yeah, this is a great female-led book with great characters and a cool arc for her, but it only exists because we did this big mega event. And that to me, I don't know that it cheapens the experience, but it does.
And again, I'll take it though, because I didn't give a shit what was going on in DC at that time. I didn't read or care about any of that other shit. What I cared about was this book.
And if that's how we sneak in good stories and do it like...
And for me, I don't care where I have to get it as long as I get it, you know? And it's kind of frustrating that that's the attitude you have to take sometimes, but then, you get used to taking it.
Yeah. It is tough.
You were going to say something, Brant.
Yeah, I mean, so my observation about the Captain Marvel thing, and I think it's relevant to this book too, that I just want to offer is... I think there's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't proposal, not just with a female character, but with B or C tier characters in general, which is relevance, establishing universal relevance.
Yeah.
Like I think the problem that, and I think some books and some writers handle it with a lot more skill than others is, I think you're right. Like, you can have an individual character, you can have a kick-ass story for them, and if you know you've only got 6 issues to make that happen, I think that's your instinct, right? You script tightly, you tell your story, you get in, you get out, you're done. I think the problem with a book like Captain Marvel, though, is that, ostensibly Kelly Sue DeConnick is being told, you have Captain Marvel forever. And so then the instinct is you make more slice of life like comics, right? Like, you have the stories where Peter Parker, he bangs into somebody. It's an old high school friend. Like, half the comic is that. And then, Dr. Octopus.
Right.
And I think there was an attempt in at least Captain Marvel to provide relevance. So yeah, it's like you've got all these other characters showing up, but I think that was an honest attempt to be like, not only does she actually have friends, because that's been a big critique of her, is that she just shows up and is kind of a hard ass and nobody talks to her or likes her or whatever, but then also being like, and these other characters who also maybe don't have fully fleshed personalities in the rest of the universe, they're relevant, they're present, they have conversations, they whatever. I think that with like Spider-Woman and Monica is very different than having Rocket Raccoon show up and be like, what's up everybody, I'm here from space. It's okay, great.
Marvel has been fucking the Guardians of the Galaxy into every single title they possibly can.
That's what I mean, where
a
it's
couple
like
of years now, and it's annoying as shit.
Well, I mean, when you make that much money on something that you weren't expecting, like,
right? Well, that's the thing, is that
corporate overlords
they made a movie of it, and it's like, okay, that's popular, so let's put the Guardians in everything, and that'll boost sales on all these books, and it's pointless and annoying.
Yeah. And that's what I mean about
the boost sales, in which case it's profitable.
That's what I mean about the potpourri thing, though, is that like, you have some stuff that smells good on its own, but they just figure if you kind of throw more of the stuff in together, you can get a different thing going on here. And I feel like sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And the problem with that is that it will sometimes make the book not... I don't know, like I feel like a lot of the problem with, say, the Captain Marvel, movie or proposed movie or these other things is that there's not a whole lot of solid something for someone to grab onto and say, oh, this is a really compelling Captain Marvel story.
Yeah.
And we could totally turn this into a movie and it'd be super cool. It feels a little bit like, well, we're trying to get people interested. We're not really sure how to do that. I don't really know how to write something that big, meaningful, and compelling for this character. So I'm trying to drum up as much attention as I can to this before our shot kind of dies out.
And I guess I have a question for you guys. I guess I've always kind of wondered this, but like, I mean, in a universe with Superman or with the Avengers, like you don't really need other superheroes, right? Because those guys can take care of like all of the major shit, right? So sometimes I feel like the studios start to think like, well, I mean, we already have Superman to deal with all our major problems. Like, why do we need a Wonder Woman?
Yeah, see, I think that's a misapprehension that just because there's one big powerful hero, like you don't need anybody.
I agree.
I don't think
with
that's
that.
a studio problem. I think that's a writer. I think that's a writer problem. Because
I
think the problem with the shared universe, and I think if you especially, I was making this comment about the question earlier, is that in the Charleston comics, right? It's him, it's Blue Beetle, and
Captain Atom,
and a couple others, right? Like, there's no one else on any other tier to deal with those problems. So having your kind of pseudo Batman analog and your pseudo Iron Man analog and Ted Cord, sort of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you have these people and they're at a slightly different tier and they kind of fit in their own little universe. Just like if you go and read Valiant now, right? Like, they've got their own characters at those own tiers. But if Marvel absorbs all of those characters, then just like they did with DC did with Milestone or whatever else, the other representation issues aside, you end up with like, we've got 20 people at tier A, 20 people at tier B, and then what do we do with all these other people what tier are they at? And then it's like, well, if they're not going to move, then why waste the time on them? And I think that's the complication is like, if Iron Man's always around, then why the fuck would this person show up? And actually, there was a Marvel event a few years ago, and then I will let Kaylee talk because she's being very patient with me, called Shadowland, where basically Daredevil gets possessed and all this shit happens. Well, for whatever reason, like, and it felt much more legitimate than some times where it's like, well, gosh, the Avengers are gone. But like literally at that point, at that point, it was like the Fantastic Four, they're fucking gone. Avengers are fucking gone. So it's like Iron Fist, Spider-Man, and Luke Cage, and a couple other people are like, so about the Hell's Kitchen full of ninjas thing.
Here's some street level something.
Yeah, should we do something about that? Yeah, I guess we're all gonna go do something about that. Meanwhile, it's like Galactus is eating something. So I think there is a place for those characters, but it can be really hard. And I think, you get these people who are like, why would you ever need a Wonder Woman? Superman can take care of everything. It's like, well, Superman's kind of busy, and it's not like Wonder Woman can't do shit that Superman can't, because she can.
Well, and also,
and she will.
The motivation of a character isn't defined by like what they're capable of handling. Too.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, Kaylee, go ahead.
So I think the Daredevil Netflix series handles this really well with the idea of, you have these A-list superheroes. Yeah, their top tier Avengers can handle everything, except they are operating on such a huge scale and their like scope of interest is so broad that when they come in, they just fuck shit up. And then they leave because they have to go to the next big crisis. Yeah. And so you have these other heroes
vacuum.
Yeah, you have these other heroes who are operating on different levels with different specialties, and they can fill in the gaps that otherwise these heroes would leave. And I think if you have characters, if you write Superman in a way where he can handle every problem ever, and he doesn't ever need backup, and he can always handle everything, he's always at his A game, that's a incredibly boring story.
You're doing it wrong.
You're not writing a good character.
Yeah, you're writing a terrible Superman story. And so one of the issues is that people want to have these A-list characters come in. They want them to hit hard and fast, and then everything's fixed and better forever. But that's not how superheroes work. The reason why we have so many superheroes is because we have all these specialties. And that's incredibly important to having a not only a diverse scope of capabilities and of villains, because every superhero has one villain that's kind of specific to them, but it's also a great avenue for representation. Yeah, and that's writers and major studios need to use that as an opportunity to bring in more voices of other people.
Those stories are still cool and compelling.
Well, I wanted to specifically mention a book that ties directly into this, which is Al Ewing's Mighty Avengers, where literally the Avengers are off in space saving the entire universe from destruction. And Thanos shows up on Earth and just starts wrecking up the place. And it's like Luke Cage, She-Hulk, Spider-Man, White Tiger, Monica Rambeau, and like a couple of other random people, Blade.
Yeah.
And first they're fighting aliens, and then Shuma-Gorath shows up, and they're like, oh, holy shit, what the fuck do we even do about this? And coming out of that, they're basically like, the Avengers are off saving the world or even the universe. We are just going to hunker down in like Brooklyn and have a hotline where if you have a problem, you can call us and we will come and help anyone.
If you know where to find them.
Yeah.
And
it's a great series. But we have barely, I feel like, even touched on the actual story of the 5 Books of Blood. So I did kind of want to talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
I actually really, really like this story. And I know that, I mean, I've read the stuff that came before it, so I have a little bit more context. This story actually scared the shit out of me. And specifically, it's pushing my monster buttons. This idea that like you can read something or you can experience something that will just drive you insane and turn you into a monster that will murder your husband and baby or like whatever. I found it intensely creepy and enjoyable. Like the changing art didn't, like, it really didn't even penetrate to me that it was like, oh yeah, this is really different. Like, yeah, the style kind of came and went a little bit, but it didn't really impact the way that I was reading the story. And I found by the end of it, I'm like, this was really cool. I enjoyed the hell out of this. I want to read more.
I read that differently than you did. Like what the Crime Bible does.
Really?
Because it's not, like, in my mind, it's not any kind of magic or any kind of, like, Necronomicon
no,
or anything.
And I'm not saying that. It's this Lovecraftian, like, knowledge that was not meant for man, where, like, you read it and it's not like you're mind controlled, but it completely changes, like, your understanding of the universe, where you're like, oh yeah, everything that's like horrible and nasty and violent, like that's all the good stuff. Like that's what you're supposed to, like, I need to murder all of these people in horrible ways because that's a virtuous thing to do.
Right. And I don't read it like that at all. Like no, it's just a book. Like it's the indoctrination of faith, like any faith. It's just a book. Like it doesn't matter what you read.
Well, I think
it matters if you buy into
that's interesting because there's this whole thing where Renee's talking about, like, I've read the Crime Bible and I'm worried that it's changing me.
Right, she's read it like 32 times.
She's talking to Batwoman, if I remember right, in there, and they have this whole argument about this. And I think that's where this fits or is a question book, because what's being questioned is actually the validity of certain ethics or values as they are, and whether or not you completely agree, when you're presented with alternate worldviews like that, there is some degree, whether you like it or not, that you'll question, like, well, am I really that sure that the things that I think should be the way they are should be the way they are? Like, and I think she's kind of doing that basically with this, is like, well, yes, there are these awful things and I know that they're awful, but I'm forced to wonder why people would maybe not find them that bad or be so inclined to change their worldview to something like this.
This is a very specific Renee Montoya story, because the Crime Bible, at its heart, the greatest lesson of all is murder. That's Cain's greatest gift to mankind, according to the Crime Bible. When you're brought up in a cultural setting, the things that you do on a daily basis don't seem weird, because you do them. Everyone you know has done them. You look at them the same way. It's like everyone grows up, gets married, and has kids. Why? Because that's what the wedding magazines say. That's what TV showed you. That's what your parents did. That's what everybody's done, right? But there are other alternatives to that lifestyle, and we quote-unquote alternative lifestyle, right? Like that bullshit term. But it's like there are cultures in which that never existed, or if you had been brought up in a culture in which you never ate eggs and bacon for breakfast, like, would you still think that that is breakfast food? No, right? Like, it's not human nature to eat eggs and bacon for breakfast. That's cultural you haven't been brainwashed by your culture, but you were brought up in a very specific culture that is what you eat for breakest.
In Japan, you have fish and rice.
Yeah, exactly. Places, everywhere they eat something different for breakfast. The UK, stop eating beans for breakfast.
That's wrong.
That's not breakfast.
That's dinner.
Food.
That's immoral. That is immoral.
Also, that's not real bacon.
Yeah, but I think that what the 5 Books of Blood does to Renee is she doesn't read it and go, oh, this is, now I've been like enlightened to some kind of mystical or cultural worldview that changes the way I see things. This is a woman who literally almost pulled the trigger on several people. Like, she has killed people in the past as part of the line of duty, but she's also almost in cold blood murdered the man who murdered her partner. Like, this is a person who doesn't need to be tipped very far into, like, how wrong is murder. Like, that's
the thing, is that I think that this concept is that nobody has to be tipped that far. Like, the difference between being a part of this ideology and not, like, it's razor thin. It's just it's on the other side of the paper.
I don't know.
You're right next to it all the time, and it's just this little push that sends you into this completely different worldview, and that's what's so frightening about it.
Yeah, and I guess if you think that everyone is capable of murder and only a moment away from it, in which some people definitely think that, then I think, that interpretation is like totally valid. But I don't know that I buy it.
Well,
I don't
believe that in a real life day-to-day thing, but there's this secret fear in my heart that you can hear that one thing. Like, you can have that moment of dawning realization where you just hear the right thing and suddenly you go, yeah, I do want to murder everyone that I've ever loved. That makes so much sense to me.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, Toby.
I mean, I think it's more along the lines of like
it plays into this fear that I could be a monster and not ever have known it.
Oh, you don't have to worry about that, Toby.
Everyone knows that you are.
Everyone knows. No, but I mean, I think that if you handed, 50 people a gun and told them, which actually this is the plot of a different comic that we have not talked about. If you hand someone a gun with a bunch of untraceable bullets and an untraceable gun and go, there will be no ramifications if you murder this person. And then like 100 people, like a lot of bullets. Like, like a round number, like 100.
Okay, 100 seems fair.
And you were like, go kill this person. They did something, they wronged you and you'll never get caught. I don't think 100% of people would pull the trigger.
No, according to Brian Azzarello, a high percentage of them would.
Right, but I don't.
They also have not read the crime Bible.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I buy Azzarello's premise in that. But I think that another reason is they're targeting people who are already
of course.
But I think that if you handed someone a gun and were like, yeah, you can kill that guy and no one will ever know. Like, I still think some people deep down will go like, no, I won't do that because they have been morally cultural. They've been brought up in a culture in which they believe at the core of their being that murder is wrong. And the crime Bible is just the other side of the core of that coin, where it's like, murder is fine. Murder is actually the most right.
I mean, I understand that you may have gotten that interpretation. I don't think that's the actual intention within canon. Like, I mean, even Rucka himself references Lovecraft in talking about how the crime Bible came to him as an idea. And I think the intention of the participants of its faith and I think this is the heart of the Batwoman versus Renee argument is basically, I have stared into the abyss and the abyss now stares back at me. Like, that these are values that are actually so monstrous they're beyond any normal moral.
But if it were as easy as to just read the book, then they wouldn't need this training camp of death, and they wouldn't need the guys in the punching bags.
But the guy even says himself that there are things within the text. There's different versions of it. That there are secrets and prophecies and parables above and beyond. That
different versions contain different things. That's what reminded me of the Night King.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But also, I think it's also that issue of. It's not so much that the intention is that any person could just read it and then become it. It's more like it's kind of like this compulsion thing, right? Like, those who have that capacity, those who might be tipped by exposure, incremental or otherwise, will then.
And Renee is one of those people. Yeah. No, I buy that.
The mark, without having read the text, will start murdering and killing.
Yeah.
Just by basically, if you look at it as an outsider, being told you now have the mark of Cain, and then they get blood smeared on their forehead and they start murdering people. So there is a mystical element to it, definitely. Yeah. But I also think that a lot of this is pulling directly from the idea that people use religion to do monstrous acts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
and they will use religion as an excuse.
Well, I think it's
especially, time that this was written and the time that we currently live in, we have a lot of religious extremists, and people want to say, oh, well, it's it's the Quran or it's the Bible, and
right.
That's what's happening, that they read this book and this happens. And no, that's not what's happening, because people interpret the text different ways. People are pretending basically to say, well, the Quran told me to do this, or the Bible told me to do this.
People are already monsters. They're using the text as justification.
Yeah, and they're hiding behind this idea of like, well, this is a religious act, and it's a monstrous act.
I think
and this is a religion specifically that is based on you do monstrous acts. That's what you do. That's holy revelation.
Yeah. Are they?
And I think that this plugs in specifically to the way that the DC universe operates on a metaphysical level. Mm-hmm. Good and evil aren't these abstract questions of moral relativism and what is right and what is your culture. Good and evil are literal things that exist.
Yeah.
And you can be influenced by those things, and being exposed to the religion of evil, where evil is the thing that you aspire to.
Right.
This religion of crime, like, this is something that affects you on a magical level.
Is this almost like a magic version of the anti-life equation?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, I think it specifically plugs into Darkseid and the anti-life equation, and it's the presence and the adversary in DC that is God and Satan. I think that this is all interconnected, and I think it works really well in this book because it's done on this very human level.
Well, it's vague too.
Yeah,
it's open to interpretation.
Absolutely.
Is the book actually tied to that evil thing, or is it
right? I think that one of the things that you're supposed to do is question whether these people are just religious zealots, whether they are taking the opportunity of having something that validates their pre-existing beliefs, or are they being actually affected by a book of evil?
Yeah. Well, that's why I had to come find this page again, where she's talking here at the end of that, and the line is like, it's been a pleasure teaching you the lessons and watching you gain mastery in each, saying you practice deceit. And she responds, and I've sought the truth. You've succumbed to lust, and I regret it. You've acted on greed for the charity of another. You've committed murder but offered mercy. So everything he's bringing up, she's kind of not really refuting, but I think that those panels are good for this sort of conversation in the sense that this is, again, a good character for this kind of story because she's on this, like you said, she's on this point where she's experienced many situations that morally you think, no, you shouldn't murder. You shouldn't, do this and that. But as a cop, there are a lot of times where it's like you'll see people committing a crime, but you could sort of understand why it's being done. You can understand the motivations that people have. And I think that Renee's responses in this are kind of talking about, yes, I was exposed to this alternate belief system. Yes, I saw these things and I was curious about them, but I still have the capacity to reason and I can still make those choices, but see the consequences. Just like with any other belief system, is that you don't have to accept them like, say, the cult does and go, oh my God, this is great and ultimate and good.
Right.
She's still faced with this, this knowledge and this information that was like imparted to her. And on a human level, still going, yeah, I regret that decision, or like,
she has the ability to reject the teachings.
Yeah, I did a greedy thing, but for good reason, or like, hey, you killed somebody. And it's like, but I gave them an opportunity to do right by things and basically made that call. And so I don't know. Like, I feel like this is, again, a fun story in that sense for her because she had been in a position where a lot of these things have come up in the past and is able to just kind of use her brain and make the decision she's going to make as a person.
Yeah, and I think that's a good contrast to what Renee went through in Gotham Central. And I think that Gotham Central is important to this story, and I don't want to spoil too much about it, but that I haven't already. Sorry, everyone. But at the beginning of Gotham Central, we know that Harvey's off the case, off the force, because in a previous case, he found out who had committed this specific crime, who had killed someone, and they had gotten off on a technicality or something. And so instead of, letting the law run its course and that person walks free, he basically tipped the mob off to where that guy was under what do you call that?
Witness protection.
Witness protection. Thank you. The guy was in witness protection, and Harvey tipped the mob off and got that guy killed. And Renee's like, "How could you? You were a cop. You did a horrible thing. That is the worst. You did the worst thing that you could do. We're supposed to be protectors." And at the end of the story, Renee has the opportunity to kill a man she knows is a murderer. And she chooses to offer him his life, even though it haunts her for the rest of her life, knowing that she should have killed him. Or she feels like she should have killed him.
Aims at them as they're running away, but then instead of making the shot, rolls over on her back, fires into the air.
She does not fire her gun up in the air and go,
damn it.
She literally has him cowering on the ground in his own kitchen, crying on the floor,
Yeah, but I just reimagined it, and that's how it happened.
No, that's a good one, too. That's fine. And I think that, we also didn't read 52 for this, but there's a moment in 52 where Renee has to kill a suicide bomber. She sees someone with this, dynamite vest on, and she has to kill him. And in the scene immediately after, Black Adam is trying to honor her for saving the people at his wedding's life, and she doesn't show up for the medal ceremony. And when he comes to get her, she's in bed with a woman, and he's really upset, and she's so drunk that she just keeps insulting him, and he grabs her by the neck and is about to choke her to death, and she's just like, do it, because she wants to die. And I think that this is the character we now have going into the Question 5 Books of Blood, and I think that matters. I think that what she's seen affects the way she reads the book, and that's why I guess I have a harder time buying it as just the book does something to you. I think it's her experiences that she brings to the book change the way that she reads it.
Well, I think that's a lot of religious people. For example, when I was growing up, we had this thing, Set Free Ranch, where basically what it did is they collected drug addicts, former criminals, things like that. They lived on this desert, or on this ranch out in the desert. And it took me a long time as a kid. I was like, well, that's a really good thing. The church puts a place for these people to go and things like that after they're out of prison. And what makes me think of this is this idea that religious people may take these people in their circumstance and kind of go, hey, see, you being exposed to the Bible, it was this holy thing, it was this right time for you to see this content and choose to change your life. When in actuality, what's usually happening is criminals are going through a serious life change, coming out of prison, which is a structured environment where you're told what to do and everything else, day and night, to a situation that is back to being morally ambiguous, making your own choices, figuring out whether to, quote, do right or not, by the law and by people. And so there is this kind of odd mysticism, that happens with these groups like Set Free and everything, where it goes, you used to be bad, but by the glory of God, you're here. And it's amazing how quickly you'll hear these criminals, hardened criminals, in many cases, turn around and go, I read the words of that holy book at that right time, and God was speaking to me, and I've changed my ways, hallelujah.
Right.
And I kind of wonder about how much of this story ties into, or at least, responds to that sort of experience. If you're in a dire place in your life, if you've experienced some awful shit, and somebody comes to you with, quote, the answers, or tells you what you might want to hear to feel a little more or less guilt, dependent on whatever it takes to get you to that next stage in your life, and offers a philosophy that may fit into something where you don't have to make those choices with guilt. I kind of wonder how I'm losing the word here, but how inspired you're going to feel that text is, I guess, or that divine appointment that comes to you.
Yeah. I say this about a lot of things that we read, it's like we're all going to experience them differently because we've all brought our life experiences to the text. Like, you can't help but bring how you feel about life, people, ideologies, government, mythology, religion, like any of that. You can't help but bring the way you feel about that to a text. And I think that Greg may even be speaking about the way people read anything, just that their life experience affects the way they read things. And
some people might see a situation like that as opportunistic evangelism. Other people might see it as, divinely inspired, depending on where people come from at what time.
Well, I mean, a good example of this is how you and Tobiah both read the book as a different thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like every book.
Ever.
And I don't know. I think the vagueness of works like this, we never see too much of the interior of the Crime Bible. We never know exactly what it tells these people to do. Is it magic? Is it tied into the pantheon of DC? Like, do we know any of that?
Well, we also know that it has secret codes in it.
Yeah, but we don't know too much. I think Greg tells us just enough to give you something to latch on to, but at no point is like, here's exactly what it does. Here's 4 pages of exposition to tell you.
Delivered by Batman. Conveniently shows up and then disappears.
To boost sales.
By the end of the narrative.
I think that it is smart writing to give you enough to latch onto and to let you kind of feel the questions that Renee feels.
Yeah.
And it's a great book for the question to be in because there's so many questions.
Yeah, so many questions.
So many question marks, smoke question marks in the background of panels.
Truth.
My favorite.
Looking at him again.
Also, at the beginning of 52, my favorite part is Vic peels the Batman off of the bat signal and then spray paints a question onto the bat signle and just shines it into Renee Montoya's apartment. Beautiful. And is like, "Are you ready?" And that's how 52 opens. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm ready. Let's go, Greg.
I'm ready as balls.
I'm so ready right now.
Did she scrape that off in this book or at the end of 52?
At the end of 52, she puts the bat signal back on it.
See, I did read her part of 52 before I read this, and I liked the 52 stuff better.
Oh, the stuff with her and Vic is really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, there was good stuff in this. I liked this as well. In fact, I was just so angry that I could not finish it because there was not an ending in here. Yeah. And I could not figure out where it continued until I got here and actually asked you.
Yeah, Greg does that with all of the question stories, which I think Brant said it right before we started recording, but that's like kind of the perfect thing to do for the question. You leave the book and you're like, I have so many questions. It's like, yeah, you do. Damn it, Greg.
Don't you though?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think this is a good book, but unfortunately, it's tough to hand people because it is the middle of a story. Like Kaylee said, you can get stuff out of it, and that's good to know. But
I think it's what's best and worst in superhero comics, that they are these soap operas that have been running for decades and decades and decades. And for somebody who's into them and knows what's going on and has been reading things, it's very rewarding to read a chapter like this, and you're like, oh, what happened after that? And you're like, wait 3 years and find out.
Yeah.
It's rewarding to somebody who keeps reading them because these stories keep coming back up and these storylines keep continuing years later.
Yeah. And that's
very, very hard for somebody who's not into these things, who's not following them closely, who doesn't know, okay, well, this came after this.
Right. But that's the big two exclusively, and not superhero comics, because superhero comics as a genre, that's not required.
I don't know about that. On a certain level, I think that the big two are so fundamental to superheroes as they've been produced in the last 50 years that maybe that is a part of what the superhero genre is about, as it's traditionally been done. I mean, it's certainly possible to create a superhero story that isn't part of that mythos, like Invincible, but I feel like when you lose that element, you are losing something that is a part of the genre.
I don't know.
And that's like saying
it's like saying soap operas are the definitive romance story.
Well, I was going to say it's like saying fantasy has to have magic swords and gods and magic and all these things.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, but what about these fantasy stories that don't have those things?
But you're talking
about, well, yeah, they're also fantasy, but they're a different kind of fantasy.
You're talking about format, though. You're talking about a genre.
No, this is part of the genre.
I don't know that I agree.
I mean, it's like saying, what I'm saying is that we've got sword and sorcery and we've got high fantasy, and these are both fantasy.
Right.
You've got superheroes that have these like long-running, decades-long soap opera plots that run from book to book to book, and you have superhero stories that don't have those and they're both superheroes. We just don't have the different words that describe different subgenres of superheroes.
Maybe. I mean, I hate genres and I hate subgenres, so like I just outright will disagree. But I understand where you're coming from, and I just think that there has never been another company that has had the opportunity to do what DC and Marvel did. And if they did have that opportunity, would they do the same things? Would they bring things back around?
Well, I think that there are other people who have tried.
I think Invincible
has tried to do intentionally what I think Marvel and DC started doing unintentionally.
Yeah.
Well, either way, I think this is one of the reasons that I prefer street-level hero stories in general for comics, is that there is it's a lot easier for something to feel more resolved on this, like, or more contained, I think, than these superhero stories. And it's a lot easier for a person in general to pick up a book about a street-level hero and not need to know, like, a bajillion years of history to kind of be like, well, here's an adventure that they're having that you don't need to know like everything ever about them to enjoy. I don't know whether or not it works super well in this book, but I feel like it's easier when you have street level heroes to just have an adventure.
I think there are writers who choose to write in such a way that it draws heavily on what happened before, and I think there are writers who choose to say that yes, while that did happen, it's not relevant to the story I'm telling right now. I think a good example of that is like when Mark Waid came back to Daredevil, came to Daredevil. Like, it's not that he doesn't know that Matt Murdock has had all this horrible shit happen to him. He's just like, we're just not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to tell you a different Daredevil.
What were we talking about the one time when we were talking about pulp stories and pulp? We were talking about Umbrella Academy.
We were talking about
where what it is or with that story is you can kind of allude to this big thing happening and it can become just part of this characterization where it's just like, oh, the time that happened. Yes, let's not mention it because it's too dramatic and I can't take it. And I feel like, again, with these like hard-boiled sort of stories or police and detective stories, I could be like, man, this awful thing happened. It's untalkaboutable or unmentionable.
I feel like there was actually a pulp character like that, and it might have been Doc Savage, where the editor would refer to stories that were never published.
Yeah, that happened a lot.
Well, that's what we had talked about. That's exactly what we had talked about in Umbrella Academy, is where you can have these fun, interesting characters that you don't know, or you don't have to know everything that ever happened to them to have fun with them.
But I think on the flip side of that, Ed Brubaker's run on Daredevil, while it is a street-level hero, you cannot read without having read like the previous 10 years of Daredevil, because like he's so entrenched in like what was going on with Daredevil that like that story becomes like less enjoyable if you don't know all the stuff that happened. So I don't know that it's specifically a street level hero thing, but
Grant Morrison's Batman.
Yeah. Right. But that brings the question, is Batman a street level hero?
Yes, sometimes.
Usually in his own book.
Yeah. But I would love to outright agree with you, Kit. But I do feel like a lot of times
you can just do that. Save yourself the time.
No, I think I won't though. I think that a lot of times the street level people who come onto street level hero books choose to, while acknowledging previous stuff, tell a new story.
Yeah.
And I think that is because, like we were talking about before, they don't always have a book continuously running.
Yeah.
And that gives them the opportunity to kind of hop in and go, boom, here's a question story. I'm out,
Yeah,
that's
exactly
where you don't have that opportunity with a lot of other characters because they're like, put the fucking books out. Put them out right now,
Pictures of Spider-Man.
400 pictures of Spider-Man. We need them today on my desk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I don't know. It is, this is an interesting look at a snapshot of time that was DC in the mid-2000s. And it reads a little bit like one.
It should not be as historical as it feels. Because that, just happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's 10 years ago in the world of comics, man. That's a long time.
Like, you have adult readers now who were little kids when this came out. Which
absolutely.
Is weird.
I mean, anyway. I'm going to be so excited when there are, 8-year-olds who are the first adults who are the first comic I read when I was 8 was New 52 Batman #1, and I'm going to be like, I'm dying. I'm so old. How am I still alive?
They'll all insist it was the greatest thing ever written because of nostalgia goggles, and then we'll all pretend like we don't do the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, 1 through 6 were pretty good.
I mean, I don't want to talk about this.
God damn it.
But anyway, I feel like unless anyone has any pressing matters about the question, I think people should check it out.
Yeah.
But it does come with the aforementioned caveats that Kit mentioned.
Read, not the New 52. 52, because it's good.
It is good.
And then read this.
Yeah. Also read Gotham
and then
Central.
Read Final Crisis Revelation.
But wait until we pick it for the show.
Yeah, read... I urge... Because I reread it last week, and man, that is a great book. Everyone go read Gotham Central.
I've been pitching it.
Yeah, dude, it's so good. Someday we will read it, but everyone at home should read it. Anyway, let's move on to recommendations. And, Cade, would you like to start us out with your recommendation for this week?
Sure. So I'm going to bring something back that we've talked about before, and that is Black Science.
Ooh.
One of my favorite TV shows was the TV show Sliders. Loved that show. And this book always makes me think of Sliders because it's dimension hopping
science knots
stuff, adventures in multiple dimensions,
science adventurers. Is that
so
what they're called in
we talked
Atomic
about
Robot? Action scientists. That's the term I was looking for. All right, go ahead.
We talked about Volume 1 when it first came out, and there are now 3 volumes out. And so I would like to revisit the book, see what has changed.
Yeah.
See if people's thoughts about the book are different than they were before.
Cool.
And, just generally...
Black Science Revisited.
Yes.
Volumes 1 through 3.
Absolutely.
All right. Brant, what would you like to bring to us this week?
I would like to talk about Brett Lewis and John Paul Leon's The Winter Men.
Ooh. I'm meaning to read this.
Which basically centers around a Soviet policeman being embroiled in a kidnapping investigation when it turns out potential Superman programs may or may not be involved. And the series got a lot of praise because it's done in this very kind of unique style. It focuses a lot on this kind of post-Soviet era nature of Russia, and so it has some unique cultural touchstones that a lot of critics thought were being very genuinely represented. So kind of, instilling American-style superheroics into a very strictly Russian-style narrative with some really interesting art. It suffered some really crazy time delays, so I think those series never got its full due. It was originally supposed to be an 8-issue Vertigo series. It actually became a 6-issue Wildstorm series, and the 6th issue took 2 years to release. And it was like a 40-page double wide. So it was unique in that it was a book that almost basically died, and we've talked about a few, like Four Eyes that comes to mind, where it's like, it's going to end, more will come, and you're like, 3 years later, you're like, yep, and when's that going to be?
January 2016.
Yeah, and these guys actually managed to come back and were like, it's going to be done, and here it is, and it's done, and... there's some critiques about its pacing because it was kind of cobbled together over a long period of time, but I'm always interested in looking at the superheroics milieu in different lenses, which I think is appropriate given what we were just talking about with this and kind of how that functions. And I don't know how much I've talked about this on our show, but Soviet and post-Soviet era Russia were a big thing in my house. My father was intimately tied into that world through his work, and so it's just something like the Cold War and stuff after it were big parts of my formative years and my educational experience as a personal interest because I was living around it all the time. So I always kind of have a soft spot for Russian stories and set in that era. So
awesome.
The Winter Men.
Excellent.
Cool. So my pitch this week is a book. It's one of my favorite books from when I was a kid. I've actually talked about it on the show a number of times. I've never pitched it because it was not available, but Marvel just published a complete collection, including all 4 miniseries plus some ancillary material. And I want you to imagine for a moment if you took Mad Men, crossed it with Scrubs and the Avengers, and you would have Damage Control. By Dwayne McDuffie, the late, great Dwayne McDuffie. And I cannot remember the artist's name off the top of my head. But this is basically about a insurance company that cleans up and restores buildings after superheroes smash them and then just ollie the fuck out. It's really, really funny. It started in the late 80s, and it's kind of got that like kind of lighthearted, humorous 80s superhero style to it. And they did 2 miniseries, I think, in 88 and 89. And then it kind of like lay fallow for a while until they did another one in the 90s that wasn't quite as good. And then there was a 4th 3-issue World War Hulk After Smash miniseries that was pretty good. And it's really funny and a whole lot of fun. And I've talked about it enough times. I think we should sit down and read it. Because you can get the whole thing in one trade for, I think it's $35 for like 15-ish issues worth of stuff.
These Ultimate Collections are some of my favorite things that Marvel's doing right now, because I feel like they're a good bang for your buck, especially when you compare it to their 5-issue trades for $20.
And it's really interesting to me, too, having just reread it yesterday. It's interesting to see the evolution of the way that superheroes are represented from the late 80s into the mid 2000s.
Cool.
So
very cool.
That is Damage Control, currently being considered for a pilot for a new sitcom on TV.
Oh, great.
Which would be super cool.
I still want the Insurance Adjustment Bureau for DC Comics to be a show. Or a comic, I guess. Just like, how much are we insuring these 8 Batmobiles for? Do we really need another Robin cycle?
Yeah.
Is it really a plane? Well, are you sure it's actually a plane and I'm not looking at
I guess this is a minor spoiler, but one of my very favorite scenes in this is from the 2nd issue when building that's owned by Latveria gets all fucked up. And they're like, oh, we need to fix it, but Dr. Doom has not paid his bill, and we can't work for anybody who hasn't paid a bill in the last 6 months. And so their comptroller has to go to the Latvian embassy to try and convince Dr. Doom to pay his repair bills.
That's great.
And it is hilarious.
Excellent.
Doom does not pay repair bills.
Doom and bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Maybe my favorite thing ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that reminds me I need to pitch a series again that deals with Doom and bureaucracy. So we'll get back to that. But I'm not going to pitch it this week.
All right.
Kaylee, what are you bringing?
So I am bringing Journey into Mystery, Fear Itself. Focuses on Loki in particular.
Ooh.
Specifically, it is the origin of Kid Loki.
Yes.
God, the thing looks crazy.
It's written by Kieran Gillen and with art by Doug Braithwaite.
Yeah.
The art is absolutely gorgeous, and I have not actually read it yet because I've been waiting to read it on the show, and then I had a moment of horror when I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to pitch, where I was like, oh my God, they might have already talked about this book. I might have been waiting for nothing. So really excited to read it. I know there's a lot of Young Avengers things that kind of spin out of the idea of Kid Loki and stuff, so this is the origin of that.
Yeah, Kid Loki is one of those characters where he starts off in the Fear Itself miniseries, and then it branches off of Thor and becomes its own thing for a while, and then he shows up in Young Avengers, and then he gets his own series, and you kind of have to follow him from place to place to place to get this entire story arc, which begins in the aftermath of Siege when the old Loki kills himself. And then this new teenage Loki shows up and then goes through his very long story arc.
Yeah. Sort
that
of like,
just kind of wrapped up in the run-up to Secret Wars.
Yeah, Loki, Agent of Asgard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, and all of it's really, really great. And this is the beginning of that storyline.
Yeah. So check it out.
Way to make the pitch for Kaylee, man. Jeez.
I know, right? I was like, yeah, I'm going to leave it vague, but interesting. And Toby's like, nah, let me tell you everything about this book.
Let's make it long and
okay.
boring.
I didn't say anything about the story, because you can find that out for yourself.
Kit, what are you bringing for us? What gems have you uncovered for us this week?
I have to do this right.
Okay.
Long ago in a distant land, I, Kit, the shape-shifting master of darkness, unleashed an unspeakably awesome book, but a foolish samurai warrior wielding a magic sword set forth to oppose me. Okay, I'm bringing IDW's Samurai Jack.
Ooh.
Wherein
So toasty.
Samurai Jack, who is beautiful in all ways and
Yes.
super duper important to me, has to go looking for threads of time that, we all obviously know that Jack needs to go back to the past.
Yeah.
It's in the wrap. Okay.
Yeah.
So Jack is looking for a single thread of time because he finds out that this is a way that if he obtains one, he can go back to his own time. And obviously, Aku is in there. He's the situation. Those who are not familiar with Samurai Jack, kill yourselves. But
Well, excuse me, everyone.
Yeah.
I need to go kill myself.
yeah,
You
okay.
heard the lady brain.
So what I'm going to do
How have
is
you
tell
not
you.
heard of this?
Well, I
Brent?
know what Samurai
No,
Jack is,
okay.
but I've never read it. I've never watched it. I've never
All
heard
right.
the rap.
Well, you
So-
need to. It's the theme song.
Samurai Jack, I could just do the whole rap, but I won't. Samurai Jack, basically this foolish samurai warrior wielding a magic sword stepped forth to oppose Aku.
Yes.
What had happened was this demon who tears open a portal in time and hurls Jack into different dimensions in time.
the future.
Shows
maybe.
up in Jack's time in Japan, takes him from his home, and Jack and his magic sword fight many, many monsters, robots, crazy things, go to different places. Like one time he goes to a rave and he has this really great
My
hat.
favorite
and it's my
episode.
favorite, and he's a bad dancer.
Oh, and he has a pacifier.
Yeah, and it's hilarious.
A glowing pacifier. I love it so much.
Jack is amazing. Like, I'm on this high because I watched Hotel Transylvania 2, and they had the end credits. And Genndy Tartakovsky, Samurai Jack, that's one of his things.
Yep.
And I got so excited about this again and remembered that I had this beautiful Samurai Jack book. So, gorgeous art happening. It's one of the few cases, I think, where turning a formerly loved comic or cartoon into a comic was the smartest and most wonderful decision, and I have no regrets.
They're getting better at that.
Yeah.
They used to be.
Okay.
Yeah. They did. They made a Hotel Transylvania too. Yeah.
No, I didn't know that he made it. So
yeah.
'cause
So
this is-
they animate end credits for it, and
Gotcha.
his beautiful monster designs were at the end of this movie.
Okay.
And I was watching it at the drive-in and just tearing up because I remembered being young and watching his cartoons.
For those who don't know, he did Samurai Jack and also Clone Wars.
Yes, also
And
Clone
Powerpuff
Wars
Girls
and
and
Powerpuff
Dexter's
Girls and
Laboratory.
Dexter's Lab.
Yeah.
Greatest animator ever.
Pretty badass.
And usually I would worry a little bit because so much of his work depends on his stunning animation. But flipping through this when I went and bought it at Emerald City, I was like over the moon
yeah,
with the work that was done on it.
they've definitely gotten better at adapting cartoons to comic books because when I was a kid, they were not so great at it.
Except for Ren and Stimpy, the comic book written by Dan Slott.
Was that
Which was
good?
it was so good.
I mean, to be honest, like Bongo Comics was like the only guys who could do it for a long time.
I hated Bongo Comics.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like they
It's not
read
my
exactly
jam.
like a Simpsons show.
It always felt off to me.
Yeah, well,
I liked him.
Anyway,
yeah, I thought they were funny.
Yeah, so for fans of Samurai Jack or people who have not watched it before, I think it's a really exciting and fun book to look at. Particularly if you were a fan and saw that the show was unjustly incomplete.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun story, and nice and open, so you could do a lot of things with it. But I got mega excited about this book, so I thought, why not something not necessarily light, but exciting.
But awesome.
Yeah, kind of awesome all around.
So this week, Multiversity comes out in the trade, in the deluxe hardcover, and I was like, oh man, I'm so gonna bring Multiversity. And I was talking to Toby about this last week, and he was like, well, to read Multiversity, we should kind of read Final Crisis before. And I was like, yeah, I guess I could pitch both. But now, after having gone through like this emotional roller coaster that I went through this last week, rereading all of Renee's stuff all the way up to now, and just feeling all the feelings I felt while DC fell apart and came back together, I think I need to take a break from DC, and I can't reread all that stuff. So instead, I'm going to bring a gem from the dollar bin that I found at a local store called the Toy Box in town. And that is The Incredible Hulk and the Thing, written by Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson. And it's fucking awesome, and I love it. And it's this really cool, like, oversized, old-school graphic novel where the Thing and the Hulk get transported into space and have to do some stuff. And it's great, and the art's fucking amazing. And it's Jim Starlin. It's really cool.
God, I love Jim Starlin.
And at the end,
Jim Starlin loves you.
Hulk and the Thing end up on a giant pile of cheeseburgers about to fight each other, and I won't tell you why, but it's great.
Does it involve muscles and yelling?
Yes.
All right.
Then then everyone's in. But yeah, I think one of my favorite things about the Hulk is when he's not dealing with earthly things and the continuity of Marvel, and when he's not like, oh, you're a part of the Avengers now. When he can just have like cool adventures as like a Conan guy. I think that's cool. So everyone should go find this. I like that it says American graphic novel up in the corner. Also, it was originally $6 for this giant oversized thing, which is like, I know it was probably like 1986 money, but
that's a lot.
I feel like that's a lot of money in 1986.
I wonder how hard it is to actually come up with a copy of
1987.
Yeah, that might be a fun find.
Well, go look for it. Because it is...
It might be on Marvel Ultimate for all I know.
Yeah. It's published by the Marvel Entertainment Group. It's called The Big Change, I guess, is the subtitle that only appears inside the cover. Yeah. It's not on the outside cover.
Yeah, look at that.
But it is the Hulk and the Thing in The Big Change. Story by Jim Starlin, art by Bernie Wrightson.
Cool.
Stanley Presents the American
this is
graphic
probably
novel.
Before they really figured out publishing graphic novels.
Yeah, well, 87, man, that was early on in the graphic novel life cycle, really. So, yeah. And in my own life cycle. So, Kate, what would you like to read this week?
Damage Control.
Yeah. Brant, what you got?
I really liked Fear itself and all of its cast off and accoutrement. So I'm going to go with Journey into Mystery.
I am also going to vote for Journey into Mystery. As if you couldn't tell, I was excited about that pitch.
Kaylee, what you got?
I'm going to vote for Samurai Jack because I have the rap stuck in my head now.
And,
me too. And now I need to go home and watch every episode ever.
I have Sam Lucina's version of the rap in my head, which is not appropriate for the air.
Has that ever been a concern?
Yeah, it is for that one, yeah.
I'm going to have to ask you later. That's how
bad it is.
I'm going to have to ask you later.
Yeah. Kit, what would you like to read this week?
I super want to read Black Science, but...
Ooh. Oh, yeah.
I need to actually catch up on Journey into Mystery, so my motives are selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah, as always. So... yeah.
So what are you voting for?
I need to catch up on Journey into Mystery.
Just making that clear.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to vote. I was torn in my head between Black Science and Samurai Jack, but I guess it doesn't matter now. So Journey into Mystery it is. All right. So let's read Journey into Mystery, which is an amazing beginning to a epic
So are we just
Loki
reading
story.
the Fear itself issues? It's only like 3 or 4, right?
I think it's 5 issues.
It's 2 volumes.
Okay, maybe it's more than 5 issues. All right, well, Journey into Mystery, Fear Itself, Volumes 1 and 2.
Is this?
I will post in the show notes specifically the names of the trades that we will be reading.
Yeah, so I think there's... Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Journey into Mystery turns into Sif at some point, and we're not reading that.
Right, but that is specifically Journey into Mystery featuring Sif. That is part of the title.
Yeah.
So don't read that.
Don't read that.
We'll read it.
I mean, read it, not for this.
But not
absolutely read it.
Yeah, it's great. But not right now. Save it for another day.
Basically, that is the tail end of Journey into Mystery as it was published in the last decade. Yeah. So just read the whole thing.
Sure, I guess. No,
it's all good.
Not this week, though. This week we're reading specific things.
Specifically read the first 2 volumes of Fear Itself, Journey into Mystery, but then read the rest after that.
Later, at a different time. Anyway, we will see you all next week. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Bye.
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 Thank you for listening to View from the Gutters. I hope our recommendations have inspired you to go out and find some new comics you'll enjoy. Join us next time for a discussion of our selected title, but like every week, we encourage you to read all of the recommended books. In the meantime, please leave us an iTunes review. It really does help new listeners find the show. You can also like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at ViewFRTHGutters. Feel free to email us at contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Please send us any questions, comments, or recommendations you might have. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.